All right, let's dive in. So, Robert and Sarah, I've been a huge fan of the work that Kantar has been doing on purpose ever since your groundbreaking Purpose 2020 study, which came out last year. If you haven't seen it, guys, highly recommend you go and download it. It was one of the most insightful frameworks for how companies adopt purpose and how it's a competitive advantage that I've seen. I cite it all the time. And so when you reached out and said, hey, we've done an analysis of purpose-driven campaigns. Do you want to know what's going on? I was like, yes, we do. So let's talk a little bit about why you guys decided to commission this in the first place. This is back in 2019. You started thinking about this, right, guys?
Yeah. And what also Purpose 2020 learned is that the why of purpose is not the most complicated piece. I think it's widely understood by now that the power, but where most of our clients struggle with is still on the how. How do you get it rightly executed? And we touched upon already quite a little bit in the Purpose 2020, not how you just do the articulation, but how you infuse it, but also how you mobilize beyond. Mm-hmm. But still, there was more questions still coming from the industry, still nagging on the why. And also the ARF, the Advertising Research Federation, said, can you really help us even more narrowly? What are good purpose executions and what not? And what can you help us guide and learn? And that's the piece of work we've been doing over the last few months, which indeed was planned to be released in June. But as the learnings are so meaningful, even for the times of COVID, they decided to bring it forward to last week. And that's why we now can talk about it.
Yeah. And Sarah, do you feel like this topic has suddenly gained a new relevance right now? The idea of not just what purpose is, but how to successfully activate it. Do you think it's more relevant now?
I mean, I think it's as relevant as it was before, and purpose is even more relevant now. So the fact that you're going to have to learn how to activate well is absolutely true in this moment. You don't really get to do it in a different way. So it's important to know how to do it well. And the same learnings apply in this moment as they did, pre-COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, let's dive in. Please fire away. Please share your screens with us. We'll walk through it and we'll have a quick chat after this as well.
So I will share my screen.
You will share and I will start talking to save time. So basically, there are in fact two pieces of research we want to share. So one is indeed, the one about activating purpose and what to learn from it, but also want to share some highlights from the piece of research, which is the COVID barometer, which is a Kantar global survey over 30 markets, over 25,000 people, where we on a weekly basis really measure people's attitudes and perceptions towards brands and COVID. And those two pieces of research, we want to answer two questions today. Should brands respond to COVID and be specific about the unique situation? And then obviously, how should they do it? I will take care of the first question, and then Sarah will take the tough one and go deeper into how you should do it. Now, if you ask people bluntly what brands should do, then 8% of the respondents, just 8% said brands should not advertise. So, they really expect you still to be alive and kicking in these times. But it gets a bit more interesting to see what do they then expect. A third would say they should support hospitals brands, or over half would say brands should support the government, or 75%, is about informing brands about your brand and about your company, what you're doing to face the situation. So just talk how you behave as a company. And finally, also 75% says, talk about how your brand or your product is meaningful for me in those times. So there's really, if you need to answer the big question, is this a time to step up or to step back? It's definitely a time for brands to step up in doing so. Now, this is obviously should not come as a surprise, because this trend that brands should step up beyond themselves as the product delivery they do. We know, and most of the audience here is quite immersed in the whole purpose thinking, is there already for quite a while. So it's typically something, a trend which was there is now more amplified. And again, there's a lot of data indeed talking about that. Indeed, it is expected that we play bigger roles with our brands And again, the COVID data survey barometer shows indeed the appetite is there. Or if we put it a little bit differently, what you see on the next slide is indeed now we're entering what we would call the area of the public. And I think there's a build. Oh no, anyway, we are now entering the area of the public. Playing a role in COVID is really meaningful because, you know, it started with the marketing area of the product. So what's about product safety and superiority. Then it was about the area of the persons, and, you know, it was not the product, but also what you do for them as a person with functional and emotional benefits. And now what do we contribute next to those layers to the public domain? And again, in COVID, this is really meaningful as we see, you know, the response of institutions get very mixed and even disorganized, what the town says or the state says or the government. And therefore, in this area of the public, what the new marketing framework is, brands talking about purpose, but also talking, you know, unique situations as COVID is really meaningful. So that brings to the question, how should brands do that? Because we know from purpose, you can go really wrong and you can go really right. And that's the task of Sarah.
Yeah, you can hear me, yes?
Very good.
Okay. So ultimately it is about acting with purpose. And as we sort of set up before we started talking through the presentation, we sought to figure out how best to do that in conjunction with the ARF at the end of 2019. We had a lot of clients coming to us and coming to the members coming to the ARF saying, how do we do purpose well? And we wanted to understand kind of what are the best in class strategies that we can employ to do purpose marketing well and execute effectively. And in order to arrive there, we gathered a cross section of campaigns. So we wanted to look at campaigns that were big. We wanted to look at campaigns that were kind of small, from large brands, small brands, from really successful campaigns and also less successful campaigns. And across different industries so that we could really have a representative corpus of material that would be our baseline for analysis. And then we analyzed those from across multiple lenses. We looked at how this connects to the brand itself, what it's responding to in larger culture, kind of how it represented people and their needs, and the impact it had both on society and the brand. And we coupled that analysis with in-depth interviews with campaign owners to understand what is the climate that all of these, you know, brands and agencies were swimming in that enabled them to successfully activate on purpose. And it was that baseline that informed our key findings. And we really sought to distill all of the learnings into a very actionable, straightforward framework that brand owners could apply. And it came down to you, them, and the world. You being yourself, them being the people you seek to serve and your fans, and then the world is how do we really impact. A purpose campaign doesn't do any good, isn't any good if it doesn't do any good. So the world has to be central to every single purpose campaign. So you, them, and the world. And that's what we're going to dive into today in how best to activate purpose. So starting with you, how do you do authenticity well? I think we hear the word authentic pretty consistently when we talk about how to best show up as a brand, but how do we make sure we do authenticity? And one of those things is having precedent, and others connecting to the core of who you are. So what is your core brand proposition? And then if you do those two things effectively, a good gut check is, does it feel like an obvious move in retrospect? And the EVA initiative, the Equal Vehicles for All initiative by Volvo, really did these three things. So they recognized that most cars were designed for an adult male body, and Volvo, believing that cars should be safe for everyone, publicly released 40 years of safety data that applied to all body types so that the industry could use it. And this had precedent because they did the same thing with a seatbelt. in 1959, I believe, 1959, they invented the seatbelt, but instead of patenting the design, they decided to release it to the public so that everyone would have access. There was a very strong precedent for this campaign. It connected to the core of who they are. I mean, Volvo is their differentiating kind of factor as a brand is about safety. And so doing those two things together meant that this was an obvious move for them in retrospect, a smart one, but a very obvious move. But it is not all about you, and your campaign should not be all about you. It is also about them, and in executing, it is very important to partner with the people who care, to let them, wherever possible, tell their story, so centering them as the heroes, and giving people something to do, provide a platform that they can action themselves. And a great kind of illustration of this coming to life was the MGM Universal Love campaign. They recognized at MGM that some of the entertainment industry is not as inclusive of LGBTQ plus folks, especially when it comes to the lyrics of traditional love songs. So they created an album that included, that shifted the genders of the artists in order to make them more applicable to queer couples. And when they launched this, they partnered with the people who care by going out to the artist community and having conversations to sort of vet the idea with LGBTQ artists. And then they let them run with it. They let them tell the story by choosing the songs that most resonated with them and letting them produce them in the way that they kind of saw fit. So really letting them bring it to life. And this campaign also gave people something tangible to do. It was an album you could download and listen to with your partner. And then they also did experiential activations, that including a karaoke pop-up for the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, where you could select the pronouns that you wanted to sing your love song to. And lastly, the world's, but not last, right? Definitely super, super still important to have at the forefront of your mind. You really need to be doing something good. So solving a problem, tapping into culture, changing a conversation, solving for a cultural tension, and being in it for the long haul. Like the world's biggest problems were not created overnight. They won't be solved overnight. So really committing for the long term. The Patagonia Fight for Public Lands campaign was, Patagonia as part of their preservation efforts over many, many years, has tried to protect public land, including Bears Ears National Monument. It sought to solve the problem of protecting the land from government privatization. They even brought a lawsuit against the president and the Trump administration. It tapped into culture because it was really connected to the rising resentment towards the administration, especially around environmental issues at this time. And they were also in it for the long haul. So they weren't just trying to use this moment to, make a big claim against the president. They had been trying to protect Bears Ears National Monument during the Obama administration, when they'd been part of a lobbying group to protect this public land. And it was actually the year of this campaign launch, they had intended to sort of unveil all of their efforts that they had, this had become a monument because of their work. And at the end of the day, they were back to protecting it. So it was really about being in it for the long haul, that they'd started this, they'd achieved what they wanted. And then when it came under threat, they went back to continue protecting it. So again, really doing something for the world and for today and tomorrow. So we're seeing this in the COVID reality as well. And it doesn't, just because we're in a sort of new moment doesn't mean we don't still want to follow these same foundational practices of being you. So doing something that feels deeply connected to who you are as a brand. Nike, we all know Nike, their purpose is to unite the world through sport. I actually can't think of what would have been a better way of doing that and bringing that to life in a campaign during this moment than their Play Inside, Play for the World campaign, empowering the individual the individual athlete to literally play for the world. So connected to who they are as a brand, and really feels distinctly Nike because of that deep connection to who they are. In contrast to every COVID commercial is exactly the same clip, which you may have all seen. So those are the commercials where there's the same kind of music at the beginning that's, looking at the world we're in, and the same, we're all here to help, and then the same sort of, we're going to get through this together, which doesn't tap into the distinctly you part of your role and what you have to say in this moment. It's just saying something rather than having something unique to say, which is why all brands at this moment, when they're thinking about how do we activate, need to really reflect on who we are as a brand. What do we uniquely bring? How do we leverage that for something distinct? Because at the end of the day, if we don't, it will start to look like everything else and isn't really going to do that much for your brand. Centering everything around them, letting them really participate and do something. So this was brought to my attention actually by Aptel earlier this week. The Teeks, which is best known, they are a ballet flat company, and they really spurred a movement with their hashtag #SewTogether, Operation Sew Together campaign. So they encouraged folks at home to make masks and to donate them to their local, public health organizations in need. So any place that had a need for masks. And then they gave people gift certificates, up to $100 worth of gift certificates for sewing and donating those masks. And they have donated nearly or over 500,000 masks at this point, and have created an entire kind of movement on social media of folks sewing together, of contributing, of using their kind of time well in quarantine to contribute positively to the world through this platform that Teeks provided. So really centering all around them, of empowering them to participate, to solve the problems. And, with gift cards, they're now able to try the brand, right? For the first time, you're going to have new folks thinking about Teeks. So it's great for the brand too, and making a huge impact, and also empowering people to feel like they can make a difference in this moment, which I think, we can all resonate to how daunting it is out in the world right now, and how we want to actively participate in making it better if we can. So Teeks has provided a platform to do that. In contrast, so Yelp really also, I think in good intentions, wanted to help their small businesses on their platforms to, weather this very challenging economic storm with, so much less demand. But what they did was they auto-created a fundraisers for all of their small businesses, and without involving them. So this was kind of the inverse of this tenant. They didn't ask them to opt in, and they went about it kind of without consent, and without incorporating and including them in the process. I think this could have been a really powerful initiative if they had had people opt in, encouraged them to participate, as opposed to Yelp just running and doing it for them. They have since added in the opt-in kind of factor of this, so businesses can have a fundraising page if they would like, but it now incorporates them in the process rather than the brand going about it and doing it themselves. And lastly, the world. So there are so many challenges to solve for right now. There's so many problems that we can all see that need help, whether that's PPE, mobilizing people, and brands who are stepping up to actually solve those problems are doing it right. So HP quickly mobilized their technology and their 3D printing to manufacture PPE and equipment for healthcare parts for hospitals, and they're doing that at the industrial scale. But they've also already donating thousands of parts to in-need areas, both in the US and in Spain. But they've also made these hospital grade designs available to anyone. So they're universally downloadable. And it has meant that individuals have been able to download those and also donate them. I actually have, my partner has picked up multiple Shield downloads from people who have 3D printed them, and they're literally being shipped to hospitals, shipped via her car, sent, picked up and sent to hospitals. So these are ways that people can participate in solving this very, very critical need today. And HP is exploring how to operationalize this so that they can make it sustainable for the long term. For brands that aren't participating, we said it in the beginning, this is the most important moment for brands to begin activating on purpose. And when you don't do it, it really just comes off tone deaf. And that's what happened with the fried chicken and chill campaign. I don't think Popeyes was trying to activate on purpose when they launched this campaign, which was, take a picture of yourself with fried chicken and we'll give you if you're one of the first 1,000, we'll give you our password for Netflix. Nothing wrong with that idea as a campaign, but in this moment, it just didn't land. And that's because it didn't address the kind of cultural moment we're all swimming in when all of the challenges are so visible that a brand didn't do something meaningful. It's like, do the chicken and chill, but also do something meaningful. That they didn't address that, really just didn't land with consumers. So this is the moment, if you're not already thinking about purpose and how you can make an impact on the world for the better, it's the moment. It's the moment to start thinking about it. Robert, I'll pass it back to you.
Very good. So if I just wrap it up in the last slide. So I think the core learning we want to get across to you is that brands should stay in their swim lane to be that true you, but that definitely within that, a real desire for the audience to step up and involve them and rally the world. And to get yourself ready for that, we see always two critical tasks you need to achieve. So first, obviously, you need to define what we call your public role, to play your role in the area of the public. What is your brand purpose? What is your bigger impact? So you can be true to your North Star. And then it's about activating it. Again, not just about yourself, not just about the world, but really on the you, the them, and the world framework. And then with the them as the amplifier, you can really rally a much bigger impact as a brand. And that's what the world needs today and tomorrow.